This is seriously a collection of games I've wanted to exist in a modern format for almost 20 years, and I am completely losing my mind. I am so freaking happy that it's at last arrived. It's time to talk about classic Grand Theft Auto. What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here, and this is my honest review for the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. It seems like Rockstar Games is one of the most beloved developers. The stuff they craft, whether it be set in the Wild West or modern times, they're just such lived-in worlds. And their maps are so massive, you can easily spend sometimes thousands of hours exploring the cities they create and still not see all of it. Well, as good as their recent games have been, I've always been much more of a fan of classic Rockstar. The early days of stuff like Grand Theft Auto on PlayStation 2 and Xbox, the releases of GTA 3, Vice City, and San Andreas completely melted my eyeballs because this was a universe that was so filled with just piles of unique detail, from tiny hidden collectibles to funny banter. Like, there's so much to see and do in this specific playground. It feels like my dream project that these games are back and improved in so many tiny and substantial ways. This is a full-blown remaster in the most perfect sense of the word. So today what we're going to do is actually look at the goods and the bads, looking at what's new, what has been improved, and what is strangely missing. Now let's start off by talking a lot about the gameplay before we dig into the graphics and the missing soundtrack. Now first things first, you're going to see a little bit of like side-by-side comparisons here and there because I'm one of the few people who actually owns the original versions of all of these games, and I've played them recently. The old school versions of Grand Theft Auto were certainly charming in their own way, but the updates they've done to this were very necessary. So when these games came out back in the day, they were very much not intended to be third-person shooters. You know, they were meant to be just big, gigantic sandboxes that you would run around and make your own adventure in. Well, this time around, they've managed to fix everything about how you aim your guns, which holy heck is this a much better experience. Now there's two different parts of this. Aiming is now still based on the lock-on system. Whenever targets were walking up or dangerous, by holding down the trigger you would automatically aim on the nearest target. And this worked decently for back in the early 2000s, but it is such a clunky mechanic by current day standards. The way it works now is that whenever you hold the aim button you'll actually target somebody, but then you have this free aim reticle, so you can actually aim at specific body parts if you want to try and shoot them in the knee, the head, the arm, shoot a gun out of their hand, stuff like that. Picking out specific locations to shoot now and seeing the different ways they react is now a much simpler experience. Some of the missions in this game really require some precision sharp shooting, so it's nice that you can actually aim and take people down in the proper order and as soon as you want. This is a very, very nice liquid experience, especially because the other aspect of this is they brought in the weapon wheel system from Grand Theft Auto 5. So just by holding the weapon select button, you can instantly switch from a sniper rifle to a baseball bat or right to a rocket launcher if a helicopter shows up and is trying to stop you from your crazy rampage. These updates to the gameplay may sound like very small and insignificant, but when you're there actually in the heated action, it feels literally 50 times better to actually get in the crazy fights. Now let me talk about the controls to the driving itself. Whenever you're cruising around in the neon streets of Vice City or going up into the hills of San Andreas, it's here that you begin to appreciate the fact that steering, aiming, the gas pedals, braking, and reversing all work a lot better than they did in the original versions. The biggest difference is that now it's much more incremental controls. In the original version, just by holding X, you would go forward and square was back up. And you know what? Having full-blown gas or full-blown brake became incredibly aggravating when you were actually trying to do the precision drifting or e-braking or trying to do any of the street races and stuff. Everything works better, but also during this, I got a chance to appreciate just how fluid stuff is. Chasing down someone on the streets to run them over to get a couple extra bucks, or sometimes just doing some taxi missions and stuff to earn some extra money on the side. All of this works so much better because now the controls feel like something that's actually developed for 2021. It kind of drove me nuts. As somebody that even does love the early days of PlayStation 2 and Xbox, it definitely kind of just infuriated me at times to drive drive past a target in the original controls because stuff was so ridiculously finicky. Everything is much more balanced for precision. The aiming and the controls of cars are just so much smoother from the top to the bottom. But let me talk a bit about the graphics. I think this is probably one of the aspects people are the most curious about. So I decided to get this game twice. I bought it on the PlayStation 5 myself, and Rockstar Games was nice enough to give me a copy of the game on Xbox Series X. Now, when you're playing this game on next-gen systems, or I guess I should say current-gen systems, the graphics are very apparently better. This is definitely running at 4K. It is definitely a very solid frame rate, but more than that, it seems like everything actually fixes the biggest issue of the original versions, which was the pop-in. This trilogy used to have the worst problem of things just randomly appearing. There's still a little bit of like texture pop-in where things in the background are like loading in, but I'm not even joking. When you played this game back in the early 2000s, it was made to be on a blurry like CRT TV, like a tube TV sitting in your parents' basement or whatever like that. So they didn't even try and render stuff that was more than 100 feet away. It just didn't even exist until you got to it. Like, this is gameplay right here of the original versions of these games, and as much as I like it, it obviously has some crazy technical drawbacks. Now it renders everything off in the distance, up close, the cars you're stealing, the reflections on the surface. The updated visuals are really nice and they're really smooth. The updated draw distance definitely works better overall, but more than that, just the individual textures of the characters, the people talking, and also just looking at the cars themselves, everything looks so improved, it's nuts to me. Like, I'm glad that they've managed to make this game look modern, or at least closer to a modern day experience. At times the animations, and I do consider this to be a flaw, are still very outdated. Punching people, kicking people, watching everyone run away from you. Most of the stuff is still pulled directly from the original code, so it looks a little bit strange at times, especially our main character, Tommy Vercetti in Vice City. A lot of times when this dude is sprinting, he looks like he just took the biggest dump in his pants, but I can still try to just see how good the game looks, even if he is running around like a complete loser. Let me just do a quick side-by-side comparison. So this is the original version of Vice City, this is the updated version of Vice City, and here is some cyberpunk footage for absolutely no reason. It's very obvious that the updated visuals are doing more than just improving the way games look. It's actually making the complete overhaul of lighting systems and making it so the game itself just looks so much cleaner that you can play it at a much higher skill level. Alright, so let me talk about some of the quality of life changes they've made and the biggest drawback of this. A lot of the very painful load screens have been removed because this is a much more modernized version, but more than that, I love small stuff like the fact that whenever you fail a mission now, you can actually jump straight back into it. In the original version, it would drive me nuts, but whenever you died, like trying to finish off a mission, you had to leave the hospital, get into a cab, and go back to the mission maker. Now whenever you screw things up, it just instantly asks you, would you like to try again? And you can say yes or no. If you say yes, it starts the mission again. When you select yes, it just goes right back into the quest itself. But if you say no, you still go to the hospital in the typical fashion. It makes this a much more efficient way to play the game and takes out some of that tedious, stupid filler that felt like it just existed because they were trying to just do things in a way that had never been done before. Now, the last major gripe I have is the fact that there is missing songs from the soundtrack. Now, basically the way this works is that when you're releasing a game a second time, whether it be a remake or a remaster in this case, you have to talk to everybody who made those songs and pay them a second time, because technically this is a separate product. Well, for the most part, they got back about 95% of the total songs that are very iconic from these games, and the soundtrack is incredibly important, especially in Vice City. The fact that this is an 80s based game, part of the fun is turning on the radio and hearing all the crazy things that are being said and done and stuff like that. Well, there is a couple things that are missing, like Michael Jackson. All the Michael Jackson songs are completely gone. So yes, you can't hear the famous song Billie Jean. It's completely missing. Also, there's some very notable tracks missing from like Tupac and stuff. And while I am just very disappointed personally that these are missing, it just comes down to the fact that this company last year earned $3 billion. Why were you not able to pay the licensing fee for these songs to come back? It feels weird that, like, you guys aren't broke. Why won't you pay the $10 million or whatever it takes to get these songs to return? I mean, maybe I'm being a bit nitpicky, but it feels weird that these songs are missing just for the sake of being missing. Like, what person over at Rockstar HQ is being so incredibly cheap? A majority of my time spent with these games has been incredibly positive and fun, but there is this strange glitch that popped up 2 or 3 times in each of these games, which is strange because this doesn't mean that it's one broken spot in each of them. This is an error that seems to exist across the entire Definitive Edition trilogy, which I call the wall bang. Now, what this essentially is sometimes you'll get a wall that has no texture that lets you walk right through it, or you have a wall that is invisible. Like in this case, I discovered this basically like 3-foot high ledge that just is completely see-through. You can crash your car into it, you can jump onto it, it's just something that's here in the middle of the path and yet doesn't exist. I also encountered this while just doing some flying missions where suddenly it's put up some sort of invisible wall on these stairs which couldn't and shouldn't exist. I'm not sure why this happens, but the 3 times I encountered it, by reloading a checkpoint, everything instantly worked better. So, okay, that's just strange, but there it is. Okay, well, this game has been a very fun time. I'm glad they're back. You've seen the graphics, you've seen the gameplay, but now it's time to go to the ratings board and put a big number on it. I am giving the Grand Theft Auto Definitive Edition Trilogy a 9 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the very end. If you could, please give this video a like. If this manages to get like 5,000 likes, well, maybe I'll feel warm and happy inside. But you guys rock. Seriously, you are the reason this channel exists. Please, if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe, ring that bell, all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, keep dreaming. And don't steal cars, because even though it's really fun, apparently it's bad. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.